As the prophecies have foretold, we have once again arrived unbidden, yet hopefully welcome into our own feed and your Thursday with our next entry into our interview series. Now, you may have noticed a few things are different if you listened or otherwise paid attention to the last interview episode with Jonathan as it came out. First, the name. We want to offer our audience, among other things, both these interviews and behind-the-scenes content about our game, and decided it would make sense to name them differently. Hence, these interviews will be Reckless a Talk, which, I think we can all agree is very on brand, and hopefully you guys enjoy it as much as we did. And all of our out-of-character cast conversations about the game itself will be entitled Behind the Screen. Second, the length. We decided we wanted everyone to get to see everything the generous TTRPG creators we've already sat down with offered up in their conversations, so our main feed will now have the full hour-long conversations in their entirety. Then, all our behind-the-screen content moving forward will be held on our Patreon, including monthly recorded check-ins, in-depth level-up discussions, arc recaps, all that great stuff. Obviously, if you have any questions, please definitely reach out to us on Twitter or via email. Anyway, on to the interview. Steve has been gaming for a long time. A long time. In this episode of Reckless a Talk, he and I discuss his long-running history in the hobby, his 20-plus year ongoing D&D campaign, the importance of introducing TTRPGs to new players, his side of the story on how the crew that became Reckless Attack came together, what it was like being a fellow player in the first game of D&D Nathan, ever played, and much more. If you enjoy these interviews or have a suggestion for a future guest, please reach out to us on Twitter at reckless_attack or send us an email at recklessattack.contact@gmail.com. Anyway, enough preamble. Here's my interview with Steve, AKA Selv, AKA Pip Drowbane. See you Tuesday. Hello, Steve.
Well, hello.
Lovely running into you here.
Yeah. It's a little odd. Didn't expect to see you in the recording booth at this time. But,
yeah, exactly.
Hey.
At our pre-scheduled time for just you and I to meet up.
Right. Surprise.
Steve, I'm so excited to be here and chatting with you.
This should be fun. I am excited to impart whatever I can.
Yeah, exactly. I think we've talked about a little bit on some of the various Reckless Attack things. You have been playing tabletop role-playing games easily than any of us, and probably longer than the majority of our listeners, probably longer than a lot of people out in the world have been playing tabletop role-playing games. So in addition to certainly getting to know you a little bit, really want to delve into some of your experience and your relationship with the games and that kind of stuff, especially because you have been doing it for however long now, and you are still doing it and doing so with great glee. I think the best place that I'd love to start at with you is the big question, and one of my favorite questions, especially for people who have been playing for a long time and don't have kind of the same answer that I do of like, I don't know, I listened to podcasts and was vaguely aware of D&D, and so that's how I got in. How did you first get introduced to tabletop role-playing games?
I'm going to start off by saying that my first ever game of Dungeons & Dragons, which is the first game I had ever played, actually did not occur on a tabletop.
Really?
Yes. I'm going to try to keep this detailed but brief. I believe the first time we ever started playing I was about 10 years old. And one of my neighbors had the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Player's Handbook and Dungeon Master's Guide and the Monster Manual. So the basically the core
the big three.
Yeah, we were kind of looking for something to do, and he was a little bit older than the rest of us. I think he was around 13, maybe 14.
And did he have an older sibling or something, or was he just one of the people who saw it and then glommed onto it?
So I don't know how he got into it, but he was the older sibling of him and his sister. And then there was a group of us that were around 10 or 11 that were another couple of neighbors in the neighborhood. He was the DM, and there were 3 of us playing. And I'm going to use air quotes here as playing. What I remember from that is the character that I had made.
And this was what year too?
This was
ballpark.
This was around 1986, give or take. Okay, so we decided to create characters, and I very distinctly remember rolling 20-sided dice for the stats instead of the 3d6.
Powerful and or horrible.
Yes. Since at that particular time we were all big fans of G.I. Joe, all of our characters were basically based off of G.I. Joe characters.
Awesome.
So I think when it came down to it, I had some kind of fighter type character. And
fighting man.
Yes. And what we did is we the only thing we had on these sheets of paper, and the paper we used was, if you remember, can harken back to grade school years, it was a dark brown notebook paper, but you used it lengthwise, and so it was longer than it was tall, and it had the very, very wide lines on it, and it had a dotted line going through the center of those two lines. Yep. So you could to teach you how big your letters had to be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's what my first character was on that sheet of paper, and it was just a list of stats. And I remember having 120, but I cannot for the life of me remember what attribute it was in. I think it was strength.
Hopefully, was it a useful stat?
I think it was. I think it was either strength or con. I don't remember offhand. But when I said we didn't play, we actually didn't play at a table. The one neighbor that had the books also had the dice. Didn't have the percentile die, so it was 20, 12, 10,
6,
8, 6, 4.
8, 6, 4.
Yeah.
We play D&D.
Yes, yeah. So that was all we had, and what we would do was we would go to different spots around the neighborhood for the fighting. So we'd have one fight was like in my neighbor's backyard, and we would roll on their little patio.
Oh my gosh!
And then they're like, okay, as you're traveling, and we would go and we would move to another location. God.
You were like proto LARPing, basically.
Kind of, yes, yeah. In a way, one of my neighbors had a corner unit. We were in a townhouses set up, and they had a corner unit, and they had there was this weird green, I don't know what to call it aside from like box that was on their property. And I think it was some kind of electrical thing.
A power box or something like
that.
But
I have no idea what it actually went to, but it had a low cement kind of step around it, and then there was this thing, and so I remember stepping up on that and rolling the dice on top of this big green box for something.
I'm sure totally safe.
Absolutely,
no risk of anything, any issues there.
Sure, there was just because I hear humming now every now and then, it's fine. But that was our first game was and that's what I remember from the first time we ever played D&D. And then I had quite a long stretch before the second game.
And was that just the first, did you just play it once, or did you guys play it in that first game several times?
It was basically, I think maybe we did it twice, maybe 3 times, but then we moved on to other things. It's like, now it's nicer out. Let's go ride our bikes.
And did you, do you remember your character's name by any chance?
Yes,
okay.
I do. I do remember the character's name. I have gotten significantly better at this over the years, but for some reason there is this paralyzing thing when you try to come up with the name of your character.
Oh God!
And for a 10-year-old, it's like I don't know
many names.
Yeah, I don't know. And I was like, well, crap, I don't know. And they're like, that's it. That's your name, crap. I was like, what? Like, yep. God. Name's crap. You're putting it down there.
10-year-olds are so dumb.
Yeah. I was like, all right. So yes, my first ever character's name was a fighter named Crap.
Awesome. So I do want to hear about the second game too, but when either this first game or the second game was kind of being pitched to you, it just in terms of like, here's what it is, and here's what we'll be doing. Do you remember anything about that, or was it just kind of one of those childhood memories where, like, yeah, this is what we're doing. We're playing D&D, whatever that is, and we are following this 13-year-old who's telling us what it is.
Yeah. So there was no explanation as to what the game was. It was more or less. It was, hey, do you want to be able to play one of your favorite characters from a cartoon?
Crap. It's like everyone's favorite character. Everyone's favorite cartoon character.
Yes. Never had a last name for him. And I believe there was an exclamation point. Not entirely sure, but if I could go back and find the character sheet.
Oh my gosh.
That first of all, that would be amazing.
You'd have to frame it.
Like, absolutely. But yeah, so that was kind of how it started, was a fighter named Crap.
I think that if you ever make a tabletop role-playing game memoir, I think should be at least in the running for potential titles. Is A Fighter Named Crap, a Steve Hurwitz story or something like that.
My adventures through D&D.
Yeah, exactly. Second game, you went for a little while without playing after those first 2 or 3, whatever it was. Yeah. And then what happened next?
I think it was around maybe 12 then, and one of my other neighbors that I had met in Temple, we went to Sunday school together, and then he was like, hey, I've got this this game called Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and I went, oh, I've played that. And he's like, oh, great. So you can, we can kind of figure out, you can help me with the rules. And I'm like, all right, let me put a little more explanation to that.
Yeah.
I have played it.
Expectation management. Yes.
But then he ran like a quick game or two. It was over a couple different weekends. It, would be like 3 games again. But in that one, I was playing an elven rogue, or a thief, elven thief. And I remember him asking, well, what's the thing? What would you like to do? What would you like to get out of, whatever we're playing? And I said, I just want magic weapons.
I mean, same though.
Yeah. And so, and it's really weird as I'm talking about it, like more details keep kind of flying into my head. But I believe my elven thief found a pair of +1 daggers underneath the stoop of one of the local general stores.
And it just dropped them. Oops.
It's kind of funny because every time now, if I play video games and you kind of walk around and you find random stuff, they're like, hey, there's an elven cloak in a barrel outside of some inn.
Yeah,
I was
totally.
like, oh, that perfectly makes sense, because that's where one of my first characters found the pair of elven daggers, +1 daggers, just because he was wandering around looking through stuff.
Yeah, as one did in the days.
Yes.
How long did that go on?
That was only a couple sessions. There was no real length to any of that stuff. It became a little bit more regular once I hit high school.
Yeah, I was going to ask. So I know what we're building to is talking about your most long-lived campaign,
right?
And that's all I'll say at this juncture. Was there a point for you, again, now you've dabbled a little bit, you've nominally played D&D to whatever extent a 10 to 12-year-old or whatever can. At what point did you kind of, looking back now, start to kind of get what role-playing games were and could offer, and kind of quote unquote playing for real? And that's the most air quotes that I can use. But
right. So I progressed from that through getting together kind of either weekly or a couple of weeks, and having sleepovers, and we'd play D&D. But for us at that point, it was just fights. It was
got it.
It was here's your character. You're today you guys are fighting 3 red dragons. And I was like, okay, I could take them. After that, it kind of went into high school, where we started having, where there was actually a storyline that kind of went through the whole thing. There was a whole group of us that kind of joined the RPGA, the Role Playing Game Association.
Oh, cool!
I
didn't know about that.
Yeah,
that was a thing.
We were part of that for a little while, and there were.
And was this a national thing, or
RPGA is nationwide.
Oh, cool!
Actually, I think
I didn't even know about it.
I'm fairly certain it's still an active thing.
We'll have to Google it later.
So we kind of joined that, and there was, you had to. It was a nominal fee, but you had to pay for membership. Dues would be collected every time we played, and it was mostly just here's some money, and it was mostly for whoever was hosting, for their parents to go buy us some snacks.
Got it. Yeah,
and it was like our little way of being
that's awesome.
Thanks for feeding us. Here's some here's
whatever
$12
pocket change. Yeah, scrape together
whatever we had. Yeah, and so that was kind of the high school experience was was more along those lines. And in that group is where I kind of got introduced to other things like, we played AD&D, but I got introduced to things like BattleTech and Shadowrun and Earth Dawn and the Star Wars D6 game by West End Games, Marvel superheroes, all of that. That was the time where we kind of like branched out and said, there's all kinds of this other stuff to play that's not just fantasy genre. We kind of went through any pre-made modules that any of my friends or I had. Whoever was running would kind of run one of those, and then we hit college, which is. I know that's the question you were
well, at least a little bit. So was D&D now kind of at this point, and tabletop role playing games generally, was that now just something that was kind of ingrained into your social life, where it's like, oh yeah, and then when we have sleepovers, we do D&D or whatever, and that it was kind of built in a little bit?
Right about during high school was when all of the nerdy Dungeons and Dragons jokes started coming up in our group. It's like, and it was things like, you want me to come in early for something? Make a charisma check. It's like, convince me.
Got it.
And it's little stuff like that. And we had. Well, specifically for AD&D, it was like, my character's armor class is so low, he can't even hit himself. Just as a brief aside, AD&D lower armor class was actually better.
For those who don't know.
Yes, than higher armor class.
It's a whole thing. You can Google it. It's Thaco or Thaco, whatever you...
Thaco, yeah. To hit armor class 0, if you had negative armor class, that was actually very good.
We'll dedicate another special behind the screen episode for Steve teaching us about that.
We had kind of like those jokes, and there was a lot of stuff going around at that point. Like another thing you could Google is the "You might be a gamer if," which has some fantastically true things on it. So, for instance, if you could wallpaper your house in character sheets.
Yep. Just the Jeff Foxworthy, but for gamers.
But for gamers.
Got it? Yep.
Exactly. And so, there was like all of those jokes kind of went around, and it was, that's how you figured out who you'd be able to game with.
Got it. Oh, yeah.
Did you get the joke? Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Hey, we're playing on Saturday.
The shared lingo, being able to kind of safely feel out like who gets this, this very underground, weird,
who's
nerdy.
going to be my friend?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You transition to college. And then what happens, Steve?
So there was one game that I was already playing with the RA, the resident assistant, at the dorm I was in, named Dom, and he was running a Ravenloft campaign.
Cool.
Ravenloft is one of those things where everybody should experience it once, and then you will forever have dread of certain things like the Mist.
Yeah.
So he started playing that, and then my friend Pete came up and said, hey, another friend of ours, Jeff, is running an AD&D game. We're looking for another player. Do you want to play? And I was like, sure. I'm in college. I'm not doing anything.
Yeah. Well, what's more D&D? Hell yeah.
Let's fill up some of these weekday nights with a few hours of Dungeons and Dragons. So he did that, and we kind of all got together. There were 4 or 5 of us. So my friend Jeff was the DM. There was another Jeff that was playing. It was Pete. It was myself, and it was a guy named Todd. We created characters individually with the DM, like working with them, kind of figure out what we wanted to play. My character in that campaign was a monk, a human monk. We started playing, weekly in college. I believe it was in like summerish of 98. My friend Todd passed away. And so we kind of had this discussion of, what we want to do. And we essentially put that campaign on hold. But we decided we still wanted to all play together. And so in February of 99, I made my character for this now long running campaign. He's a Pip Garthic, which is, my handle is Pip Drowbane on
Yep, you might recognize it if you follow us on Twitter.
Yes, it was Pip Garthic, half orc, a fighter thief. And we started playing in February. I created him in February 99 because the date is on the character sheet.
Really?
Yes. And that's how I know. And so, after we created him, it was probably a few weeks after that we actually started playing.
Sure.
And we have been playing since then.
Since February 1999.
Yeah, in that campaign. So whatever that, what's it, 2021 now?
Yeah,
so 22 years?
Almost 23, right? If
Yeah.
we're doing that math
Yep.
right, whatever it is. You guys get it
Yes.
listening at home. You'll figure it out.
Yeah, that was that campaign, but we've been playing together since 96.
Yeah, right.
So a little bit even longer than that. So that is the long running campaign. After college, we were getting together maybe once a month to play, and then that kind of got reduced as people had families and work, work related stuff. Now we get together maybe a couple times a year.
Yeah.
But still to play, and we have hit some major milestones recently.
It's been always very awesome hearing you just occasionally pepper in your own excitement when there's another one on the book, like another session that you're like, okay, cool, like a couple weeks I get to go back to this game.
Yes.
And also then for you to regale us of the cool stories or cool monuments or monumental times or milestones that you've gone into.
And most recently we actually had the end of a I don't know exactly what to call it. Major story arc.
Yeah.
So essentially, let me preface it with the major story arc.
Yep.
Was the return of this big bad evil god.
Classic.
And we after some let's call them false starts. Later on, some time travel and things like that. We successfully banished Balgoth beyond the gates of night.
Excellent.
And got apparently thrown somewhere else. We're not entirely sure. It could be forward in time, which is what we think happened, but we're not quite sure.
And this was recently?
This was actually our last game. Yes.
Really? I don't know if I heard that officially or not.
Well, officially, there we are in the campaign.
Only 22, 23 years later.
Only took us 20 some years to get there.
If you're going to banish a god, I guess you should have to earn that.
That is a long-term goal.
Yeah.
We were gathering these pieces of this artifact to prevent him from coming back, but we ended up going back in time and actually sending him away the first time. So now, wouldn't it be funny if we end up right back and like he just came back and like he sees us again?
Hey.
like several tens of thousands of years later, it's like excuse me, you're not allowed in here anymore.
We thought we told you the first time.
Remember the last time when we had to throw you out? Let's not have a repeat of that.
Yeah. Why don't you just go back?
Yeah.
So how it's always been very cool to hear stories about this particular campaign in large part because it has been going on for so long that there's just a lot of content there. Even if you're playing a couple, once a month or whatever, you have banished gods, you have done all kinds of crazy things. But also you have gone through a couple decades of life, of like actual human life, and friendship and that kind of stuff. So I guess kind of first of all, is it the same group more or less? Like this second kind of reformed group that has been playing concurrently?
It is just except for Todd.
Right.
It is still
just the same one.
We did have one other person come in for several years and then dropped out.
A short guest lasting 5 years.
Basically, yeah. So Rich did come in, and we're all still friends, but he had some other stuff going on, and so he had to kind of bow out. But our core group, has been there, been playing this entire time, and there are some groups that get together and can be, say for instance, so-and-so can't show up. Well, we're all still going to meet and play anyway. Right. That does not happen with this group. Mm-hmm. We are either all there playing or we are not playing that day.
Yep.
I think that while that is very, very difficult to get to that point, especially if you have a lot of people that are playing or you have a game that does not lend itself to that. But I think it is some of the best gaming you can do is when you have a group of people. It's the same group and you're all playing together every time.
Yeah.
Because then nobody misses anything and nobody has to, take control of somebody else's character and guess at what they would be doing, and everybody gets the same reveals at the same time.
Yeah.
It's like, the big bad evil guy takes off his mask and it's actually, and everybody does the at the same time.
You've been playing obviously for a long time now, and I would imagine just like your life has changed, just like you have changed, especially compared to 10-year-old Steve, I would imagine in at least some ways. How has your relationship and understanding and maybe even goals around what you get out of sitting down at the table, especially looking from kind of the start of that serious college campaign all the way to now? How has that shifted and evolved, if it has?
It's a little difficult to put my finger on exactly.
Sure.
But when we started playing, I was, let me do let's see, if it was 96, what would that be? I was 19?
Whenever
20,
it was, yeah. College aged.
Yeah. When we started playing, everything was still very in a college mindset.
Sure.
Right. So there were themes like the big bad evil god is returning. We have to stop him. At that point, just from my point of view, I loved the combat. Like the combat was, I absolutely love every time we went into combat. I was like, yeah, I get to showcase my character's abilities.
Yeah,
because he's a fighter thief, so he's like sneaking around and backstabbing people and getting all up in their face afterwards and all of that. Now I'm very it's kind of funny. I'm very attached to my characters now.
Yes,
more so than I was earlier. When we go into a situation, my personal first thought is, how do I avoid combat?
Yeah,
how do I get them? How do I get what I need without getting hurt?
Yeah.
Because if I get hurt, I could die.
Yes, and that I can't have.
Yeah, we can't have that.
And that's very interesting that you say that, especially just as DM Nathan have seen your last two characters, which Selv, of course, being an individual who enjoys talking, enjoys trying to connect and solve problems that way, and your prior character being a warlock rogue who liked just creeping around in darkness and never being seen, never being touched, had his Eldritch Blast from 500 feet away or whatever, that you would just be like, I'm just out of the combat all the time.
The warlock rogue warlock was more of a how can I nuke them from orbit?
Yeah.
Yeah, and Selv is kind of a talk them down and kind of get what we need. We try to figure out, because most likely we want the same thing.
Yeah.
And so how can we get there?
Yeah. When you are starting a new game, when you're creating a character, when you are kind of thinking about a campaign or a story or something that you want to be a part of, what are the things that when you sit down, that you enjoy experiencing, that you love, that you seek out? What do tabletop role-playing games do for you, I guess, basically?
So I guess it's kind of one of those things where I get to be the hero and take all of the risks, do all the things of there's probably only a 5% chance this will actually work, but what the hell, we're going for it.
Yep. Yeah.
It's that kind of stuff. So I can do things with these characters that there is no way I would do in actual life, because fear of death.
Right. Well, for starters. Yeah.
I like playing in the games where my characters can be the heroes.
Yes.
And whatever shape or form that takes, they can be the hero. And kind of for a similar reason is I'm not particularly keen on evil campaigns.
Yeah, right.
And when I say the word campaign, I mean the long term kind of game, not necessarily a one shot. Like if we're going to play a one shot and it's all evil characters, cool.
Then whatever.
I have no problem with that. I have tried to I've run a couple of the evil one shots. Running them is a little more difficult because there's not as many ways to motivate evil characters aside from I'm like, oh, here's a bunch of gold. If you're successful in this, we will name you Duke of this particular province. And it's not like the blacksmith's daughter was kidnapped. Somebody has to go get her, where all the good characters are like, all right, let's go. We're going.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And you pick it up, you get it.
Yeah. There's no question of motivation there. Well, of how do we convince them to go do it? It's just, they're the good guys. They're going to go do it.
Yeah, exactly.
And as my friend Jeff, the guy who's running our long-term campaign, likes to point out, he's like, I barely have to do anything with you guys, because it's even a hint of somebody being in trouble, you guys will go there.
You guys will travel across the continent.
Absolutely.
We'll be there.
It's even become even easier since our wizard got teleport, because then it's like 300 miles away, the blacksmith's daughter was kidnapped by goblins. So it's like, well, we can be there and back in an afternoon.
Yeah, I was gonna say we got a free couple hours, right, guys? Couple spell slots. That's no problem.
Yep, let's go.
So when you go in to create your character, you said I like being the hero, right? And I do too. I love just being just a heroic character. Those are some of my favorite NPCs to play.
Even if it's the reluctant hero,
exactly.
As long as it's
is ultimately I also very much I'm on the same page of I like having a character that ultimately makes the right choice right and does it for the, even reluctant but right reasons and,
Right.
all that kind of stuff. So when you're sitting down to create a character like that, do you start with class? Do you start with an idea, with a tone that you haven't explored or that you might be interested in exploring? Of course, knowing that, again, ultimately, like, yes, this is going to be a hero character, but your two hero characters that I've played with have been very different. So what goes into that process for you?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question because it kind of depends on what game I'm going to be playing.
Sure.
And so originally when I first started playing D&D, I don't know what to call it, the rules as written way of creating a character was the first thing you did was roll 3d6 for each of your stats in order.
Okay, it was in order too.
Yeah, and that's what you got. Based on those stats, because certain classes had prerequisites, that gave you your list of available classes.
Yeah, totally.
I should say you kind of chose race and class together because some races gave stat bonuses to attributes, and then you looked at what the prerequisites were, and if you met those, then here's your list of classes that you could take. You had to have a minimum of 9 in order to be in that class. Then there were a bunch of house rules around that. It's like, well, okay, you're actually going to roll 3d6 3 times for each stat, but you're limited to those rolls. So you roll 1 time for each stat, and you have to pick basically one of those 3 columns.
Basically.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting.
You pick one of those 3 columns, and then that gave you a little bit more opportunity to play the character that you wanted to play.
Yeah.
For that, but also gave you the same kind of stat distribution that you would ordinarily get. So yeah, I like, if I want to play a cleric, I'm going to pick the one with the higher wisdom.
Sure.
But that might mean my dexterity is 3.
Yeah. Right. Whatever
something
it is.
like that. Yeah. So sometimes what I do, even in these editions, is what I will, I'll just take out a piece of scratch paper and I'll roll 3d6 for each attribute.
Oh, really? Still?
And take a look at it and go, okay, here's the type of character this would be. Is that something I want to play? And then I'll look at it and I'll go, okay, yeah, actually, I have some good ideas. This looks like it would be a fun character to play.
That's really interesting.
And then I'll go in, and so for instance, if we're doing the point buy system, then I will go in and I will buy my points based on the die rolls. Based on the die rolls.
That's really
kind
cool.
of, yeah.
Where you'll just be able to look and see, like, okay, that's just your jumping off point to start generating ideas.
Yeah. So the stats won't be the same,
right?
But it gives me an idea of the character that I want to play, and for our game currently, I have it's a dragonborn monk.
Yeah.
And what I ended up doing was rolling it, and I ended up with my 2 highest scores were in dexterity and wisdom.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, a monk. And I was, and then I thought back to in college, the first character I had in college was a monk, and I was like, well, I haven't played a monk since then. I was like, sure, yeah, I could do that. And then I kind of went through and said, okay, story wise, what do I want to play? And I was thinking about the different races.
Yep.
And Dragonborn seemed to, that would be just a kind of a cool combination of a Dragonborn monk.
Absolutely.
Well, there we go.
Yeah, cool. Do you view yourself as a player or DM, or do you just view yourself as like, I play D&D and sometimes I do both? How do you identify, I guess?
Yeah, so I would say 70% player, 30% DM is kind of my of where I am. Maybe 65-35.
Yeah,
but I more identify as a player of the game than as a runner of the game. However, that's not that it's changed, but my time spent DMing has increased significally since COVID.
Yeah, sure.
Because I've been contacted by some groups of friends that have said, "Hey, my kids are interested in learning," and I'm just like, I've got a free night once a week. Sure,
I'm not doing other stuff.
I'll teach people how to play D&D. I will admit on this podcast and this podcast alone that there's a little bit. It's
luckily, no one's going to hear this.
Yeah, right. So. Yeah, nobody listens to these. But if you have been listening this far, just go ahead and put your fingers in your ears real quick, and we'll. I have a kind of a selfish reason for teaching my friends' kids to play Dungeons and Dragons. And that reason is that if they get involved and they enjoy it, then my favorite hobby continues for longer. And there will continue to be more stuff made and more people will be interested in it. And so I get to keep playing.
Yeah. It was interesting as when you started saying that, I was like, oh, Steve's going to say like, and then the kids will be able to run for him infinitely. But then it turned into a very nice like global look. But then also like, but I will still get to play more.
But I will still get to play more. Yeah.
It can be multiple things. So part of the reason that I asked that, and I do want to get into the new player stuff, but one of the things I really enjoy about you as a player is how thoughtful you are about what's going on at the table and about the fiction that we're all creating. You always really think about the reality as it's being presented, about the adventure, about how to keep the action moving in a very fun way. So when you were sitting,
well, thank you.
Yeah, of course. When you're sitting down to play, do you have a particular like mindset that you kind of try to bring to the table? It can be with our group certainly, or just in general, a role that you kind of take on, being both yourself and being an experienced player to facilitate things.
Honestly, it's one of those things where I like to kind of look around the table and just make sure that everybody is having a good time.
Yeah.
And even if they're not participating too much or saying a whole lot, if it looks like they're actually enjoying sitting there listening, then that's fantastic. That's why I like my characters will try to bring in other characters into conversations if it looks like they people are starting to get a little frustrated or bored, and figure out combinations of things like what can this character do alongside that character that would help us out in this situation. Like this one is good at one thing, this one's good at another thing, but if we pair them up and have them go do something, then that would be kind of cool. That's one of those things where I kind of like to spread the love.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the great strengths of our group is that a lot of us think like DMs and have that kind of that extra level of meta awareness of we're all looking out for each other, trying to be like, aha, this person hasn't done anything for a bit. And you do a very good job of being very active and leading a lot to too, which is
and there's
so nice.
There's also a little bit of, as long as everybody's good with the situation, like, and this is, I'm going to pull another example from this long-term game.
I know we barely even got to talk about there's so much cool stuff to talk about.
There was a situation where my character, the ranger, were both captured, and the only person who was still free and running around was the cleric mage. Great character, just not great on stealth.
Yep. Yeah.
But somehow was making all the rolls he needed to. He was the only one who wasn't captured, and he was wandering around trying to figure out what to do. And we had been playing for a very long time at that point. And so there's kind of this unwritten rule around the table that if your character is not there, you don't make suggestions.
Okay.
But
totally.
you can't say, I have an idea and I'm thinking it at you really, really hard. I just need you to just hear me.
Pick it up, please.
Yeah. And there's also where, we could, where we can't say things directly, we would be able to ask questions of the DM.
Right.
And say, Francis is walking around. Does he see, does he know that we've been captured? Does he see who captured, and like that stuff. And then, that will give some clues, but we don't overtly say, hey, you should do this. And,
totally. Letting the people play their own characters.
Exactly. When that was happening, Pete, who was playing the ranger, and myself were basically just sitting at the table, watching him do this. And it was still a fantastic time. Like, even though there was no part for our characters to play, and we were essentially helpless during this time, watching that die hit the table and being like, oh my God, he made it.
He did it again.
Yeah.
On to the subject a little bit of introducing new people to the game, both for questions and because there have been past promised stories in other episodes. I know even just in kind of our time of playing together, I know you have definitely introduced a lot of people to the hobby, kids, or people who had only dabbled once or twice.
Right.
You seem to be very happy to be like, yeah, sure, like, come on in. I'll show you how I do it, and we'll kind of go from there. So I will have a question, but You were also definitely one of those people for me as well, being an impactful person of being very welcoming and bringing in and being like, yes, here, let me show you how to play. And that is part of why we are here all these many years later, is that we talked about it a little bit during the Jonathan episode, but there is a local gaming store called the Dice Dojo here in Chicago, and it's why Reckless Attack exists,
Exactly.
basically.
Yes.
What were you doing, Steve, when poor college student Nathan, who had nary a D20 to his name, wandered into the Dice Dojo one fateful day?
If I remember correctly, you had kind of gone around to each of the tables and were asking if anybody wouldn't mind being interviewed, and like, how long have you been playing, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And there's always a couple people who are there that have been playing for just about as long as I have.
Yeah, definitely.
Whatever, 20 plus, 30 plus years. And I remember you going around. I honestly don't remember who was at the table while we were playing, but I remember you asking like how long people have been playing.
Yeah.
And we're getting answers like, oh, I've been playing for like, a year and a half.
Yeah. And this was back in college. I was doing a report. I was doing an essay, journalism school thing. Go embed yourself into a subgroup community. And I decided like, ooh, I want to learn more about D&D. So that's what I did. And yeah, I had just gone up and I was just asking people just kind of those introductory questions of like, hey, I'm just a random stranger. It's one of those just, Wednesday night or whatever game night type things that they would host. I still remember a lot of the people that we talked to, or that I talked to. And yeah, it was a lot. It was 4th edition at the time. I think a lot of people were relatively new, either in 4th edition or shortly before.
It was either 4th edition or Pathfinder.
Yeah, but all within a couple years, I think, maximally.
Right. Yeah. So, and people were giving answers of like a couple years, a handful of years here, there, and I think at that point I was at like 25, 27 years or something. I remember you kind of looking at me, and I could see the thought process of oh, I might be able to get everything I need from one interview
from Steve. Yeah, exactly.
So I remember we set up some time to meet at the Thompson Center, I believe.
Yes, it was
downtown, because I was working downtown, and so we kind of set up a talk during lunch.
Yeah,
and I only had whatever I had 60 minutes for lunch, so we went, we ate,
it was a food court. We just had a nice time,
and then you had come to play a little bit after that, I think.
I don't remember the exact order, but it was essentially like first week was me just kind of sitting there and watching and being a fly on the wall. And then the next 2 weeks, some of the people there helped me use their digital character creator and just whipped up a character. And I played for, I think, 2-ish weeks or something like that. After.
And then we remained in contact on Facebook.
Yep, that's how we had set up some of the interviews and that kind of stuff.
Right.
As we just were messaging on Facebook, which was the style at the time.
Right. And then you sent out a quick post on it was probably your Facebook page, just right on there, said, hey, I'm thinking about starting up a D&D group. Is anybody interested? And I was like, well, yeah, I'll play more D&D.
Yeah. This was whatever 5, 6, whatever years ago it was.
Right.
Essentially, had roped my roommates into playing and had wound down and was like, well, I still gotta be playing D&D still. Oh, and then another group of mine had kind of fallen apart because some life things got in the way, as is often the case. Yeah, I was just like, I think let's just put it out there. D&D is getting cool again, and most of the people who responded are the people who are on Reckless Attack today.
Yes. And I remember going to the first session, and I didn't know who had responded because I think it was just a direct message to you.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure. So I had no idea. We get to Nathan's place to play. Lo and behold, Jonathan and David are there. And we're like, oh my God, I know you.
Because you had also played with them at the Dice Dojo.
Because we also played with them at the Dice Dojo. And then that was the first time I met Sophie.
And here we are.
Yep.
All these years later. What's the experience, especially now that you have been playing for so long and have done so many different systems and groups and modules and that kind of stuff? What's it like for you as a experienced player and a very experienced player to play alongside new players, either to run or to play with them?
It's interesting because for most people that have not played before, they're looking for the guidelines or the rules of what they can do.
Totally.
It's like, okay, it's my turn. What can I do?
Yeah.
And what I like to say is before we start is that, think of your favorite characters in any kind of adventure book or anything like that, or television show. If you've read about it, if you've seen it, or if you just thought it would be kind of cool and you want to try it, like you have the option to attempt anything you want in this game. So the rules do not tell you, they do not give you a list of what you can do on your turn.
Yeah.
What they do is they say you can do anything you want, but that's your turn, and there is a role involved with that. And as a player, you don't need to know what you need in order to be successful. That's up to the DM.
Yeah.
And if the DM has played before, then he or she has in their head a list of guidelines that says if they're going to try to jump over like a 5-foot thing, they need to hit.
It's some number. Here's some number.
Yeah, here's some number. If they're going to attempt to, and I'm going to pull an example from Critical Role, teleport inside of a dragon and then activate an immovable rod. All right, there's going to be a roll involved with that, but give me a second because this one's new.
Let me think.
Yeah. That's kind of like the mindset I try to set off at the beginning for new players is that whatever you want to try, you can do it. Now you can't do too many things in your turn,
right? Yeah.
Because each round is supposed to be about 6 seconds. So whatever you can reasonably accomplish within 6 seconds, is what you can do. Also trying to get them to be as descriptive as possible when they're doing it. Yeah, so instead of just the I step up and I attack him, jump to the side, then slide in and slash across with
the whole movie star kind of thing. Absolutely.
Kind of give whatever description you can. And I try to do that as well, unless there's also a point of you have to kind of read the group. And if the group is not interested in any of that, then all right,
then they're not.
They're not, and that's fine. Then just the giant tries to hit you with his axe.
Yep,
that's
just
it.
the D20 roll and modifier. Thank you. Let's move on.
Yes.
Have you ever gotten burnt out playing either with a specific game or just with tabletops in general?
Generally not from playing. I don't think I've ever been burned out from playing. Occasionally I do get burned out DMing.
Yeah, sure.
Again, it's one of those things I'm trying to impart on anybody that I'm teaching to play. I pull a lot of this from Matt Colville. He on YouTube, he does a whole bunch of these running the game videos, and they're fantastic. Anybody can DM, but I'm not going to lie, there is a lot of preparation that goes into DMing a session, and you have to be prepared to kind of do that or have some things ready before you sit down to play.
Yeah.
Because otherwise your players are going to not be doing anything while you're kind of like looking stuff up. The caveat to that is that you could have a whole bunch of things planned, and then your players are like, how about we go visit the Baron? And you're like, what?
What Baron? Oh God. Yep.
I remember you meeting a Baron like 4 sessions ago, but what was his name? What is it? Okay, let me pull up a manor house real quick.
Yep.
Because we might need that. And then, there's this balance of improvisation and planning that has to occur. And I'm one of those people that if I can plan for as much as possible, that makes me feel more comfortable when I DM.
Yeah, but there's the trade-off
there is the X factor. No matter what I prepare for, the players are going to be like, we're going to go do something else.
Right, totally.
Which is perfectly reasonable.
Right, that's the game.
Yeah.
I have kind of two final questions before a lightning round. First, I want to know from your long-running 20-plus year campaign, do you have a favorite moment or favorite memory?
Absolutely. There's a couple. One of them is my character has taken on, I guess you'd call it a prestige class, which is he's a drow hunter. Like God hates the drow. All right.
Pip Drowbane.
Yes, Pip Drowbane.
As you may remember from Twitter.
That he got the Drowbane moniker because he seemed to be good at killing them. Then he was offered to be taught to kill them better. And he's like, yeah, absolutely.
Yes, please.
Yes. He had been captured again by drow because they're sneaky little bastards. And it was tied up, and he was basically had been stripped of all of his equipment in chains. And it was in an area where there was a thing called the Windgate. And what that was an ancient elven, think of it as like a tunnel between two of their elven cities.
Got it.
You could walk that tunnel in a couple hours, whereas normally it would be several weeks of travel.
Yeah, like a wormhole kind of deal.
Exactly. But they had shut it down when they had trapped a Baelor in it. Cool. And these drow bastards were trying to open it up. And they had captured us, and a thing that kept happening was whenever my character would face off against the drow, if two things happened, my character was guaranteed to slaughter every drow in the immediate area. And those two things were, he had to have darkness cast on him.
Okay.
So my character could not see. Period. And the second thing was one drow, doesn't matter who, had to say the words, I'm going to enjoy killing you.
Yep. Okay.
If those two things happened, my die rolls never below a 15, and they couldn't hit me for anything.
Yeah,
and it's just
the fates align. It's time.
It is absolute complete coincidence, but every time, every single time. And so there's this image in my head of the Baylor about to come out, and my character in chains, but he's very strong. So I actually made the roll to break the chains. And so the drow cast darkness, and the other one said, "I'm going to enjoy killing you." And then it was, and I turned to the Jeff, who was DMing, and I said, "Nobody can see this, but there is a giant grin on Pip's face right now." He's like, he's practically naked and unarmed, but those drow are dead. And sure enough,
and wouldn't you know it,
like less than 3 rounds later, one of them was knocked unconscious and thrown off a balcony and died on impact, and the other one had been stabbed by his own short sword.
That is about the best encapsulation of a character you could possibly hope for. Kind of as a piggyback, the last question before the lightning round, is there a point throughout any of the games where you were running, where you were playing, where sitting at the table and kind of going through the story and the experience has made you like emotional? Obviously, it can be cheering on great successes and just, kind of having that just meltdown of we beat the boss, whatever, or oh my God, you survived. It can be sadness, an NPC dying, whatever. But is there anything that pops into your head there about, kind of having that strong of a connection?
So there was, one of the adventures we had with Pip and that long group was basically, and this is a very, very short summary, but there was an assassination attempt on the king.
Yeah.
And our characters had prevented it. One of the NPCs who was invisible, but was on our side, had actually stepped in between the king and the assassin. And so all of a sudden the dagger was going in and just stopped 2 feet from the king. And there's a confused look on his face until the visibility dropped. And, there's our NPC friend who had been stabbed. He survived, but the emotional part was where afterwards the king kind of came up and said thank you and kneel. I was like, what? So I was like, all right, sure. We kneeled, and we actually got knighted by the king and were made lords in this world. And so I got a little choked up with that because I'm like, all right, that's pretty cool.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And one of the other NPC knights had come up and said, you know what this means now, right? And my character's like, I actually, no, I have no idea.
Do not.
He's like, what you just did, you are now expected to do. And so, it was like what you just did as basically, regular citizens and saving the king because you're knighted.
Moment of heroism.
It is now expected that you will just do that.
Yeah. I
was like, okay.
A real whiplash is what you're saying.
Yeah. That was a lot of back and forth. But hey, got land out of it, and
that's right.
He's
Lord Pip now.
Is that what it is? Yeah, basically, yeah. And so, and what's funny is my Pip is not so much on the Lord. He's like, yes, my Lord. I was like, nah, just
terrible.
Pip, just Pip. It's fine. It's like, yes, my Lord Pip. No.
Okay, now it is time for the lightning round.
All right.
So I tell everyone, you don't have to have any sort of long responses. It can be, if you just have a one-word thing, that is totally legitimate. But we ask these questions to everyone. So, First, is your glass half full or half empty?
Most of the time it's half full. In this particular case, though, it's completely empty because I'm out of water. Yes.
What excites you creatively, spiritually, emotionally?
Well, I like new ideas, not necessarily changes. Like I like my routines, but I like new ideas, and I like specifically new ideas that make things easier.
Yeah. Yep. Totally. What does not excite you creatively, spiritually, emotionally?
Rework. I never liked the idea, like even in grade school or high school, when you had to do these creative writing classes, write this thing and then get feedback and then rewrite this thing. And it's the constantly doing that same thing over and over again, which is why I always tried to write it completely and absolutely correct the first time. And that takes a little bit longer, but in my head, that's just made it easier. But yeah,
and more tolerable.
Yes. But basically constantly redoing things.
Got it. Yep. What is your favorite sound?
Ooh, I actually like kind of like the birds in the afternoon. not pigeons, but the actual like tweeting of birds, I think, and that combined with running water.
Oh, okay. What sound do you hate?
Car horns.
Oh, good one. What's your favorite word?
Ooh, might have to take a page out of Token here, but cellar.
Oh, okay.
After reading about that and seeing it written in cursive on the board, it's just it's a nice word.
Okay. What is your least favorite word?
It depends on the circumstance.
Sure.
But I'm not a big fan of the word fuck when it's used too often.
Okay. Yes.
It's like
I get that.
you know those people that it's every other word. It's just like, I understand you're using it as filler, but how about something else?
Yeah, right. At least diversify.
Yeah.
Got it. I'm very excited to hear your answer on this one. What tabletop role-playing game or D&D monster have you not faced or run that you would love to?
So I have never run a vampire.
Oh.
And I think that would be an absolute blast to run as a DM.
Yeah.
I've had characters face one.
Yep. And you played Ravenloft, you said.
Yeah, so that was we played Ravenloft, and then also in our long-term campaign, we have also faced one in there as well. But I think it would be fun to run because they're this charismatic monster, and not necessarily because they have a high charisma, but because they can charm other people. The danger isn't necessarily physical for that one. You could end up being the best friend of this guy and doing his bidding or her bidding or their bidding. But I think that would be an absolute blast to run.
What is your favorite adventure of all time? And it could be one you played through, could be one you read, could be just like a one-off little story arc that was totally homebrewed. But what is your most memorable, your favorite adventure?
Favorite adventure. I really, really enjoyed, again, in our long campaign, is essentially a quest for the Rod of Seven Parts. However, it's basically the Rod of Seven Parts pretty much in name only. Like there's I don't know. I honestly don't know if he's pulled anything from the actual adventure for the Rod of Seven Parts or not, or just took that idea.
Just there is a magic item that is in 7 parts, and you have to go get it.
Exactly. My favorite part of that was when we were looking to get one of the sections, and the idea of that is if you find the first part can point you to the second can point you to the third.
Got it? Yeah.
We were going to get one of these sections, and it had been stolen by the drow, and they were trying to get away. And my character at that point had learned the ability to shadow jump. So there was a certain number of feet he could jump by jumping into a shadow and popping out of a shadow.
Yep. Got it.
X number of feet away. The drow was escaping on an airship, and I'm like, oh, how far is the airship? It's like, can I get there at an angle where if I drop, I can grab it? And there were several dice rolls involved with that one, and the answer is yes, I could get there.
Long and short, yep.
Yeah, but that was like one of my favorite sequences because we ambushed the drow. Actually, my character ambushed the drow after jumping onto the airship because from their perspective, we got away.
Yeah.
That was one of my favorite sequences because not only did I get to, that was number one where I basically created my drow nemesis, kind of. The second part was I believe the first ever drow priestess I had killed.
Got it.
Which is very important. Pip has a tally of those. And it was great because I got to sneak around that whole sequence, got to sneak around the airship. There was thunder and lightning. I waited for a thunder crash before breaking into the door and grabbing stuff, and people were jumping out of windows, and we took down the entire airship.
A true action set piece,
it was an entire action set piece, and my character was the center focus of it. And it was just, I had such a blast during that whole thing that after it all ended, both myself and my character were just laughing hysterically. Because everything's finally done, all the adrenaline is kind of leaving. You're just like,
guess we have this airship now.
Yeah.
This I probably also know the answer. What's your favorite tabletop role playing game character of all time?
Ooh.
And I have told everyone that obviously I'm interested in yours, but it could be anyone. If you're like, I love this particular character from a podcast a podcast or a show or a stream that I've enjoyed, or this NPC from a classic adventure or whatever.
Yeah, actually, one of my favorite characters is an NPC from our long-term game, Garl. Garl is a barrel maker. sorry, Garl was a barrel maker
okay.
before he met us.
Oh. Okay.
This was a guy we had rescued, and he was just essentially a throwaway NPC.
Yep.
Garl, barrel maker. But there was a section where we had to go through where we were up against a mind flayer. And all of us were getting basically knocked out.
Yeah.
Except for Garl. Garl made every single one of his saving throws. Several sessions later, we come to learn that two of the other NPCs, Stebby and Bargo, had taken Garl under their wing and were teaching him how to fight and how to be better. Garl became a paladin. So he went from a barrel maker to a paladin.
Had a true like player character backstory, essentially.
Yeah, basically, yeah. And so now there's Garl's my favorite, I think, but those three combined,
yes,
as our DM put it a while ago, between the three of them, they are id, ego, and super ego. Like that's their three. That's their
whole
kind of their
thing,
makeup. So we almost tend to think of them as a single
as
entity.
a unit. Yeah,
yeah. But it's Garl, Stebby, and Bargo. Any interaction my character has with those NPCs, mwah.
Always great.
Yeah.
Last question: what gives you hope?
Ooh. That's a tough one. Okay, this is going to sound really cheesy, but
it's a cheesy question.
Yeah,
lean into it.
Kids playing,
yeah,
like is like it, like they're having a good time, almost doing like nothing, like and that's kind of like why I like this game. Is it's all imagination, right?
Sure.
And so you have this. They are having a blast, and it's costing no money. There's no stress involved with it. It's just
just play.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Steve, it was a lovely conversation.
Well, thanks for talking.
Kept blabbing for essentially indefinitely, but it's always a pleasure. We'll have to do this in another, 10 years or so.
And just, if anybody is listening to this and do you have any questions about any of this other stuff? Hey, specifically, how many notebooks are you on for a 20-year campaign? Anything like that.
A lot of them is the answer.
Well, luckily I write small.
That is true.
So not as many as you might think.
Steve is our essentially resident note taker in our group as well.
Yeah. So, but I can maybe I'll just post some pictures of
I'm sure
some of the stuff I've
thrilled.
scrawled. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time. It was wonderful talking as always.
Oh, thanks for having me.
And see you when we record next, Steve.
Ooh.
Bye.
Right. Bye.